Well, hello, hello. My name is Juan Carlos Lopez. I am the Director of Teaching and Learning for the Maple League of Universities. I'm coming to you from Mi'kmaq, the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. I say these words as my commitment to listen and listen and listen. This is a very dear colleague of mine that says, once you are done listening, go back and listen and listen and listen again. And what I want to listen for is what I want to listen is for learning. I want to learn about the truth. I want to learn of what had happened, what still happens in this land, and with that knowledge, move towards reconciliation and decolonization in these lands with the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I also would like to recognize that these lands I'm coming to you from have received people of African descent in several waves, and that the oldest record it's more than 300 years old, and is a person that came as a translator, so a translator between the colonizers and the Mi'kmaq. So that record in itself is really rich because that means that there had to be some contact for that person to be able to translate. So, and I say this in the same spirit of listening and listening and listening and learning and moving towards a better future for everyone. And I say these words as my, again, my commitment to listen and learn. And I do that as from my position as an immigrant and a settler in these lands. So again, thank you everyone for joining us today. We have a very special speaker. It's a person that I met in some of the teaching conferences, and I think we hit it off right away because we have some of the same interest and visions in what regarding higher education. So, and you will see why. But in any case, let me do the more formal thing. So, Tom Carey is a co-founder of the Workplace Innovation Network for Canada, which helps Canadian employers, employees, and post-secondary institutions to advance human-centric work design and inclusive innovation in Canada workplaces. He's a research professor emeritus at San Diego State University Center for Math and Science Education and an executive in virtual residence in the Faculty of Arts of Monash University in Melbourne, Australia. Although I think we should be there soon, right, when the winter hits here. In past academic life, Tom was award-winning interdisciplinary faculty member at the University of Guelph and Waterloo, and served as director of 2 university teaching and learning centers and an associate vice president for learning resources and innovation. He has advanced innovative teaching through senior positions at the provincial level in Ontario and BC, and at the statewide level in California, and as a visiting senior scholar in the Australian National Teaching Project on the future of the BA. Tom has a BA in, well, Tom was BA was in pure math and philosophy at Windsor, and was followed by a PhD in software engineering. And I learned today something very important. He was class president in 4th grade, 2 years in a row. So with that, Tom, take it away.
Thank you very much, Juan Carlos, and welcome to everyone who's here or maybe listening to the recording. As Juan Carlos mentioned, I can't seem to hold a job very long. I'm on my 3rd retirement at the moment and just don't seem to be very good at it. But it turns out we have stumbled onto something here which has really gotten instructors and other educators, educational designers, workplace integrated learning coordinators, and others really excited, and our students are really excited. So we want to share that with you, and we want to invite institutions within the Maple League to join in. You have a very distinctive role in Canadian higher education. We have something to offer, and you have something to offer us. And so Juan Carlos and I have been trying to map out how to make that happen. And I'll talk about what we've done so far, where we want to go with this, and then we can have some discussion about what are the particular bits that would be of most interest and most impact for your Maple League institutions. With me today is Jenna Besser, who is involved in our work. So we've already got a conversation going, Juan Carlos and myself, on this. Jenna has come into this conversation. She's with Basecamp Innovation, which is a startup company about a year old in the Windsor, Ontario area. And we worked with members of their team on a research project that I'll mention today. But their role is really important because they work with professionals in workplaces of all kinds, industry, public sector, hospitals, a network of long-term care homes, etc., who are leading innovation initiatives within their organizations. So Jenna and Adam and their work with Basecamp Innovation is kind of our entry point in terms of curricular work integrated learning, and eventually we hope paid work terms for students in liberal education, BA and BSc, who have something very distinctive to offer to the workplace. So that's a conversation we've been having that we're inviting you to participate in from today onward. So here's the overview, what this conversation is about and why it matters now. So in this session, we'll highlight what we've been doing with our partner educators across the country, which is really trying to develop a more innovative Canadian workforce, if you look at the big picture, but it's also trying to accelerate the workplace contributions of our BA and BSc students. We know that for those students, it can be hard to get traction on their initial jobs. Most of them eventually get there and are in positions of responsibility that use their capabilities. But getting that started up is difficult. That's exacerbated by the difficulty getting work integrated learning placements that really use their abilities in distinctive ways. So that's the challenge that we're addressing. We've got a pool of people whose talents aren't necessarily being used early after their graduation, and we think we can do something about that. The concept that we're working on is inclusive workplace innovation, and I'll define that, explain some of the history, and why it fits particularly well with liberal education students. Then we'll show some examples. Last year, 2024-25, we engaged 900 students across our 8 partner institutions in developing capability in this particular area. They're really excited, and we're really excited, and I'll show you some of the ways that we've been doing that and the resources that we have that could quick start your contributions as well. So the goal today is to show you how the Maple League could use this to bolster your student experience. And there are other opportunities there in terms of workplace partners. We have a very rich history of scholarship of teaching and learning, which you can be a part of. So let's go to the who we are when I talk about we. We are a network that currently has 8 sites. So we have educational partners in 8 different institutions across Canada. Currently, we're dominated in BC and Ontario. That's because, as Juan Carlos mentioned, I held leadership roles in both provinces, but we're breaking out on that further in 2026. And we have an outpost in Melbourne, Australia. So the Canadian map that you see is roughly to scale, but Monash University in Melbourne is a lot further away than it looks on this map. But we actually started a course there during the pandemic, which got wonderful reviews from students and encouraged us to move forward. So that's who's involved now. We're trying to build the innovation capability of our students. We use open learning resources to accelerate that, and we're relying on 2 decades of research in the European Union. So everything we do is backed by a very strong evidence base, but we're having to adapt that to our Canadian workplace context. And that's one of the ways that our students are helping workplace partners now. And we'll show you some examples of that. So that's who we are now. This is who we'd like to be in 2026. So we have new partners wanting to contribute their resources and their distinctive geographic contexts and different program settings and so on. So in addition to the Ontario ones, Brandon in southern Manitoba, the Maple League spread across Quebec, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick. And then 2 more institutions in Ontario want to join us in the coming year. Humber, which is a polytechnic institute, starting up a new master's degree in advanced manufacturing. So that will be our first audience of graduate students developing their capability for workplace innovation. And we're using our connections with a network of small and medium-sized enterprises in the Netherlands and 8 universities in the Netherlands. Those of you who are in the academic world will be very envious that they have an 8-year research grant from their government to involve 8 institutions. So it's a big pile of money. And the Europeans are interested in what we're doing. So as we work with them, we're leveraging what we've learned about helping higher education to prepare students for workplace innovation to help them move forward. I'll talk more about that in a minute. So Humber and then Mohawk, which some of you may know is a college in Hamilton in the greater Golden Triangle area of Ontario. And there it's a program in human resource management with whom we're working. So we'll be branching out in terms of numbers, in terms of geography, in terms of context. And this is part of our overall philosophy. We know that in innovation teams, more diverse teams have a greater likelihood of generating breakthrough innovations. So we intentionally are seeking out institutions that have a distinctive role to play in Canadian higher education so that we get a more and more diverse team, not just a bigger team, but a team that brings more distinctive perspectives to it. So that's who we are. What in the world is this thing called inclusive workplace innovation? Some of you may know the term inclusive innovation. Sorry, Juan Carlos, can you see the right-hand side of my slides? Okay. So I've got everybody's faces over there, but that's great. So inclusive innovation is a term that you may have come across. It's a term that's been used by our own governments. So in 2019, the Employment and Social Development Agency in the Government of Canada issued a report on social innovation, which talked about inclusive innovation. Inclusive innovation is an intentional effort to broaden the range of people who participate in innovation activities and the range of people who benefit from those activities. It's a part of the UN's Sustainable Development Goals in Goal 8, where we're looking at better work. They call it decent work for people. And the Europeans are calling that human-centric work, work that's designed to optimize the contribution and the benefit that the employees actually receive from it. And then it's Goal 9 as well, which is about innovation for all, making sure that innovation can be something that's practiced and of benefit outside of major urban areas to different populations and so on. So that's the notion of inclusive innovation. For humanities and social science students, we have found this particular appeal. So one of our faculty members in the Vancouver area is teaching a global studies course using some of the resources I'm going to show you in a moment to introduce students there to inclusive innovation. And what strikes them is, oh, I was thinking of inclusive innovation as, me going to India and helping people in a poor village or something of that sort. I can actually work on inclusive innovation in a job here in Brandon, Manitoba. And so we can bring that very attractive notion of inclusive innovation that aligns with their values and their interests and really give them an opportunity to do that back home where you live, in the neighborhoods of our own institutions. So that's the appeal. And Juan Carlos, that's Christina Page, who you met at our workshop back in 2024, who's now worked that into her global studies course. Okay, that's inclusive innovation. In Europe, they're using the term workplace innovation. It used to be employee workplace innovation, and now they're just saying workplace innovation, with the employee involvement and employees driving the process being understood. So you can see in the quotes there, the definition used in Europe to capture why this is so appealing. It's an employee-led social process of creating value by mobilizing new ideas in the workplace, but it's a win-win. It's a win for the employers because they get improved performance on the organization's mission, which again, if you're a hospital or a school board or a municipal utility or government agency, it's your mission that's being advanced by the employees' improved performance. And on the other hand, the employees get something out of it because it improves their quality of work life. And so when our students are working on their projects within our courses, they are trying to improve their work lives as workers, as well as improve performance on the mission of the organization. So there's 2 decades of research in Europe, which has very little application so far outside of Europe. So we think there's a kind of fast start that we can get there from their work. So we've been participating in the European Union's Workplace Innovation Network. Last year, I spoke at their annual meeting, and I was the only speaker from outside of Europe and one of 2 attendees from outside of Europe. So as Canada strives to broaden out its trade and its relationships internationally, there's a lot that we can learn from the Europeans. Fortunately, there's some things they can learn from us. So the project we're talking about today won an award in Europe in 2022, an award for innovation and entrepreneurship teaching excellence. So they know we are doing something of interest to them, and that kind of opens the door. Last year, they invited us to join the European Union's Workplace Innovation Network, and again, we'll be the first ones from outside of Europe to do that. Most of the work in Europe is focused around a concept called Industry 5.0, which is moving beyond the networking focus, connecting machines and people in Industry 4.0 to ensuring that the work people are doing is human-centric, resilient, and sustainable. And again, there are a dozen different multi-year research projects in Europe working on that. And again, there are philosophy faculty and English faculty and all kinds of faculty from humanities and social sciences and liberal education more generally involved in that. So that's inclusive innovation, workplace innovation. Inclusive workplace innovation was an accident. We had funding from Government of Canada's Future Skills Centre 2022 and 2023 to work with employers across the country. And one of those employers said to us, "This is sounding more and more to me like what we do with inclusion and belonging in the workplace." And out of that came a distinctly Canadian title, Inclusive Workplace Innovation. And we're particularly pleased with that, with the fact that inclusive workplace innovation will not sell in the US at the moment. I know we have one faculty member from the US listening in today. And Fraser, thanks very much for joining us. But you'll have to change the title if you're going to try to sell this in the American environment at the moment. So that's why we call it inclusive workplace innovation, because our students, especially those who hadn't seen themselves working in an industry setting, see how that matches their values. All right. How do those current institutions do what they do? How did they engage that 900 students last year in developing their innovation capability? There are 5 shared principles that we all work together on. I'm going to illustrate a couple of them and then briefly summarize the others. You don't learn innovation by reading about it. You have to get involved in innovation projects. So our students complete a progression of different innovation activities. And that gives them a gentle on-ramp to get confident about their capability as an innovator. Because we do a pre-test in terms of their mindset. Do you think of yourself as an innovator? Are you motivated to innovate? Do you feel confident taking that on? We do a post-test at the end, and in one semester, we can make a statistically significant difference in those students' image of themselves as an innovator. And it all comes from starting them off in the bottom left corner with a really easy assignment that they negotiate with their manager. And then the next project is a little bigger team, a little more complex problem. But if it's a complex problem, it's also going to have more impact on the organization. So they complete projects and they study all of the different stages of complexity that are there. So the default assignments in the courses are based in the one workplace that all our students share and with which they are familiar. And that's our own workplace for teaching and learning. So the students on the job crafting assignment actually go to an instructor in another course and negotiate a different way of completing the goals of the course. So here's a particular assignment. The default assignment was to do it this way. I think if I do this, I'm going to learn a lot more. So you'll be happier with my outcomes. And I'm going to benefit from this in the following ways. So they actually make a pitch to a manager within our workplace for teaching and learning. And all the faculty who've been pitched with that have been very receptive. Now, of course, more and more of those pitches are about the use of generative AI. And we actually have a bot that helps them to job craft around using generative AI bots. So it's very contemporary, but they have to justify it. Not just, hey, this will make my assignment easier. It's, I'm going to learn more about what this course wants me to learn. And I'm also going to be achieving other goals that make this a really good example for me. So those are the kinds of things we do. Here's another example. The smiling face you see there is from Melbourne, Australia. So this is Professor Felix Nobis, who is a professor of theater and performance. And when his dean first introduced Felix to me, he was kind of scratching his head. he's a professor in theater and performance, but he's also the director of work integrated learning for the Faculty of Arts. And so that was the connection that she wanted him to make with me, that this would be an opportunity for our students to engage in work integrated learning. I mentioned his discipline more to say we have instructors from all over the map. We have a professor of Italian literature and culture. We have Christina in Vancouver from Global Studies. We have an English professor in Windsor who's actually teaching in an engineering faculty, and we were working with software engineering students. So this is open to all, but we think that BA and BSc students have something distinctive to contribute. Okay, so this is one of the assignments in Felix's class, and you can see from the first sentence there, students are working on a campus project that affects them. So they have, if you like, skin in the game on this. And in this case, they had a client on the campus. It was the director of student engagement who really wanted them to figure this out. How do we help our students, who are almost all from outside of the Melbourne area, to really connect with the place in which their education is going on? So we have assignments that students can do in a workplace where they have a stake in the results. Now, in one of those 8 partners, the class is composed of business students, and half of those students are full-time employees elsewhere working on completing their degrees online. And all of those students are given the option, if you want to complete this assignment in your workplace, your 9-to-5 workplace, here's how we can make that happen. Every student from that working learner cohort has chosen to do it in their own workplace. So we know that these resources have impact on employees in the workplace because we're seeing that. Okay, so that's one of the shared principles across all of our 8 institutions. The second one is there's no textbooks for this because, frankly, we're breaking new ground in teaching employee-led workplace innovation. So what we've done is create a set of online resources, which each of our institutions contributes to, and each adapts that to meet their own needs. So first of those, the Understanding Workplace Innovation, was built by our original 2 partners in Melbourne and in North Bay, Ontario, Business School in North Bay, Faculty of Arts in Melbourne. Those resources, which are used on different learning management systems in those 2 locations, were adapted for the second resource you see there, which was built at the University of Toronto. So the University of Toronto, this is not a credit course. It's part of an arts and science internship program. So students who want to apply on a competitive basis to enter into the internship program. They get a sandwich year paid placement in a workplace between 3rd and 4th year of their program. So it's actually either a 12-month or a 16-month internship in which they work as innovators in the workplace. So there is a link there to the Toronto version. All these resources are currently in the eCampus Ontario Resource Library, but we haven't quite got the Atlantic Resource Library and the BC Resource Library connected up. So if you want to have a look at that, the instructor's guide is there. This is, frankly, our best online resource. They had a team of 18 people building this, so only the University of Toronto has that kind of resource. So you can see examples there, and then we have another resource in the Ontario Library for a second course for these students. So having those shared principles about what we teach and how we teach allows all of those partners to teach it in a way that makes sense for their institution. So at the University of the Fraser Valley, in the middle of BC, it's being taught as part of a social innovation and impact certificate program. So these are credit courses that students take as part of their typically BA majors. At one of the colleges in Ontario, the resources are being used in a one-year graduate certificate, which BA students take after they've graduated from a university BA program. So these are used everywhere in completely different ways. And that's why we're really excited about the prospect of having folks within the Maple League use this in another distinctive way. So that's principle 3 there. If you took our resources and just used them the way we're using them now, we would be very disappointed because we want you to do something different that adds to our diversity, gives us a way to think about this problem from a new angle, and so on. There is a common framework that we're building about what this capability consists of and how you would assess it. So the skills for innovation, the conceptual knowledge. An example of the conceptual knowledge is that employee capability is only half the story. You have to be working for an employer who wants to see this happen, wants you to be innovative, and is prepared to support that. And so on. I mentioned the mindsets. That was part of the instrument we used was part of a PhD thesis from the Faculty of Education at Queen's University in Kingston. So there's a solid background here, even though a lot of the pieces are very much in motion. I mentioned the results. We had 900 students engaged. And as you would expect, very high student ratings and all those kinds of measures that we can show you data on. The new thing that we're doing is engaging students in work integrated learning projects with workplace partners. And initially, those workplace partners are workplace clients that Jenna and the Basecamp Innovation team are working with, or that some of us who are doing research in this field are working with. So that's how we're approaching the need to have clients who will lead these projects for our students. Okay, so I want to stop at this point to give you a chance to raise your questions. I have some more slide materials on 2 of the points there. The work integrated learning piece and why we think that BA students are particularly well equipped to be a part of this. And Juan Carlos, we're looking forward to extending that out to the BSc side as well. We have a couple of proposals underway to get some funding for that, so I can talk about next steps. But let me pause there. And Juan Carlos, if you want to solicit topics or questions, I don't have the chat up at the moment. So if people have raised questions, please feel free to point them out to me.
Thank you, Tom. We have in the chat, we had, I don't know how to comment, Fraser, you made a comment on, you are right about that, Prof. Carey. And then David was saying, open workplace innovation, welcoming workplace innovation.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yes, Fraser saw your posting on my LinkedIn page, Juan Carlos. So
Oh.
so he's not from the Maple League, but he was
Yeah.
really interested in the topic.
Yes,
So
yes, of course, of course. It's always and we do these talks are open to everyone as always. You know, we have that that idea.
welcome to Bassam from Bishops. He's also been part of the conversation going forward.
Thanks, Tom. Really appreciate it. Sorry to miss the beginning part there. Had a meeting, but I'm glad to be a part of the conversation and hear how the question period goes. So yeah.
David, would you like to ask the question that you type, or would you like me to read it?
Juan Carlos, I'm in a very crowded
Okay,
student access area, so no, it might be better to reduce the background noise if you ask it for me.
okay, great, no problem. So David asked, does this work both ways, supporting diversity among students so make resources fully accessible?
Fully accessible, no, not yet. That's just a budget issue more than anything else. Um, Now, the exception there again is the Toronto ones. So the Toronto ones are fully accessible, and they've done some great work on that. I wouldn't guarantee that the others are all um, fully accessible. They have been built with support from our educational development units.
Mhm.
And so I know in the case of the ones from North Bay, um, those were accessible, and anything that's gone into the eCampus Ontario library has automatically had to pass a certain bar in terms of accessibility. So I would say we're probably not exemplars there, other than the Toronto work, but we are certainly up to the standards of most of our institutions because they've been built by institutional staff, if that helps.
Fraser,
There
I
are,
hope I'm not mispronouncing your name. Do you want me to ask the question?
Yes, that would be great.
Okay. So, with a very quantitative and extractive approach to business, especially here in the US, how can new employees help companies see the need to allow workplace innovation? The bottom line focus has hurt growth, but it is as a strongly entrenched mindset.
so I'm going to pop down Fraser to, whoops, no, I won't because I took that slide out. Okay. Um, let me just bring up slide that has the other presentation in it.
And by the way, I placed the link to the Toronto course on the chat, and if you open it, you'll get to the course. It's open.
So Fraser, here's an example from Europe. Okay, so that's where we're getting our hard data from. So
Not showing, Tom.
this, I'm sorry, I'm not sharing. Sorry.
You are sharing I think the other presentation.
Oh, okay, well, let me see what's wrong there then.
Try again. Yeah, share again.
Yeah, because I should be sharing my screen.
Yeah, but it was sharing the presentation, not the full screen. So probably that's what. When you select what you are sharing, you were probably sharing a window, not the whole screen.
Okay. Okay.
Yep. We
So
see
that's
it.
showing up now. Okay, thank you. So this is some data from Europe. It happens to be from companies in the supply chain and logistics sector in the Netherlands. So in the Netherlands, they have identified 9 particular industry sectors in which, as a country, they're going to be internationally competitive. And supply chain and logistics is one of them, based on the fact that Rotterdam is the biggest port in Europe. So the government financed a community of practice for workplace innovation catalysts within those companies. So they could all share not the innovations they were working on, but the methods by which they were preparing employees to engage in those innovations. And so it was a great way to spread the word around, and some ways as a model for what Jenna and Adam are doing in Basecamp Innovation. So here's the stat that they showed to management in those companies. They collected data on how many of your companies worked on an innovation to change the way work took place within your company, 80% in 2018, which was the year they were collecting the data. On the left side, then, in the companies that weren't using exemplary innovation practices, only 40% of those innovations turned out to be successful. Success meaning we got it to work, and then we got to disseminate it across the company. So it didn't just stay in one little corner. We had offices across the country, and we were able to get other people in the company to take it up, not just the original employees who built it. So 40%, if they didn't use the exemplary workplace innovation practices that the Workplace Innovation Network had been discovering and developing. On the right-hand side, in the companies that were using those exemplary practices, 90% reported successful innovations. So if you want your company to be innovative, and if you want your workplace to be a part of that innovation, then it's really critical that you take advantage of the evidence about what works and what doesn't work, why it works, and where and when it works. So we can make that kind of argument from the data in Europe. We don't gather data as effectively in Canada around that, but the Government of Canada's Future Skills Centre is about to announce a new research program to get that data. So we hope to be a part of that, of course, from the research side of the show. So does that help, Fraser?
Yes, that's great, Tom. Thank you. And my master's is in training and development, and that's a big part of looking at how work changes. And this is a narrow way of looking at things maybe, but the return on investment, although I like to think of, because I'm an educator at a healthcare institution also, better performance, better problem solved. But sounds like in Europe, they're kind of looking at a loop and taking close note of what innovation can do.
I think too, like you really hit a great point in your question of how can new employees help their companies? Because I think what we see a lot of the time too is when employees start, this is the time where they're least likely to stand up and say, hey, I've noticed this gap. But they're actually the best people to do that because they haven't been in that organization for a long time. They don't have that blindness when they come in. So they actually have the ability to see where innovation can be really helpful. So if we are able to teach them certain skills of how to portray ROI, how to look at a problem differently, how to use, design thinking and systems thinking when they approach a new problem before they even enter the workplace, it gives them that skill when they start a new job to start using that lens and to have the language to actually discuss that with a boss, a director, somebody who owns a program, and kind of gives them that confidence before they kind of start. So they're able to kind of jump in right when they start.
Okay. Juan Carlos.
We see a hand, David.
I'll try and communicate with the networks. It's not bad. I guess the other thing that Intersection 8 hearing impaired people would also support employees who have a doesn't matter, who have sort of English language comprehension problems as well. So that's the other way you can frame these inclusiveness, is that you're accommodating different groups as well, not just like targeting specific areas of inclusion.
Yes, thanks, David. In Windsor, when we were working there with software engineering students, that program was predominantly international students. And so part of their concern was when there's a job ad from a Canadian employer that says we want innovative employees, what does that mean? Because, from my background, I've got an entirely different notion of employer expectations. And so in that particular case, the presence of the international students was really a driving factor in the Windsor faculty member asking me to be involved. Juan Carlos, I wondered if I should maybe say a little bit more about the work integrated learning side, especially you and I and Bassam had a conversation about it, but maybe we can spark more of a conversation. You
Go
can
right
see
ahead.
you can see my screen. So this is under discussion with Capilano University in North Vancouver, where it's really the business school driving it along with the Dean of Arts. And in Brandon, where the business department is actually within the Faculty of Arts. So it's the dean there who's keen. And the idea is that their idea that they're working on and that we thought might be of interest to you in particular was to have a linked or co-offered courses, one for business students, one for art students. So those are our two biggest audiences at the moment. And there would be slight differences in the content. So 25% of the content might be different in those two courses, but 75% would be the same. And that opens the possibility for those students to work together for an external client. And the arts faculty that we were talking to, the particular faculty member was from women's studies. And she said, I'm not really sure that I could send my students out into a business to work on a project with full awareness of how the business culture might work. They don't have enough working experience in a workplace to maybe fit in as well as I would like, and that would be a barrier. But if you can combine two of my students with two of the business students, then I'm sure that's going to work, because my students can look after the kind of human-centric work kind of side of things, and the business students might be better at communicating what Fraser was asking about. How is this going to benefit the company more? So from that insight and request, this is what's developed, that course on workplace innovation would include an external project worth about 25%. And that would be done by business and art students working together. And that would set the stage for a second course focused really more on the liberal arts and science students. We have a bit of that course built in one of the resources I showed you earlier, but I'm working on another module now with a faculty member in San Diego that I worked with when I was on staff there. I was a cognitive psychologist. And we're doing a module on how do you make a diverse team? How do you help a diverse team leverage that diversity to be more productive in an innovation project? Because sometimes diversity can be a barrier. And so what are the circumstances, and how could I, as someone trying to advance workplace innovation within a company, how could I serve as a catalyst to help them figure out how to make that diversity work? So that's an example of what would be a 2 weeks worth of material within this course. So they've had a course on becoming a more innovative employee yourself, and now they've had a course on helping other employees to become more innovative. And they would do 2 curricular will projects and associated with external workplaces. Now, it may well be hybrid that they're working online. A lot of that would be curating information for the Workplace Innovation Catalyst who was there, and so on. So we do have a blog post on the 3 options for those kinds of curricular will projects, which came out of the research that I mentioned from 2022 and 23 with workplaces across Canada and with institutions across Canada. So there's some background for what we're doing there, and we really want to try to move that forward in the year to come. And then finally, we think that after 3 experiences of curricular will, that is a course project within a course that you perform in partnership with an external workplace, that at that point, our students would be ready to go out on a work term for a professional who was involved in their company's innovation program. And again, those are the clients of Basecamp Innovation and the folks that we work with on the research side. So that's where those clients would be coming from. So, Sam, any comment you have on the appeal or feasibility of that would be welcome.
Yeah, I mean, the appeal for me stems from, trying to do things differently with the students that I work with who are in the humanities, and they're often, told that they don't have the technical skills to get hired. But what's weird, what's strange to me is that when you look at a job posting, they're mainly looking for the kinds of skills that we develop in our humanities programs. So I think sometimes it's just the articulation piece pertaining to experience that's really important for our students. So the appeal is that while these programs are the programs that produce leaders in our society, and we all acknowledge this, like there's evidence to that, but getting them to that step where they can take up space in the quote unquote real world, well, that doesn't necessarily seem like a direct path. So for me, that's the appeal. It's simplifying that path to some degree, and being a part of a project that's interinstitutional. I think that's going to lead to some broader ideas tied to innovation, and also not just hearing from the same stakeholders too. I think that's really crucial. So for me, another element to all of this is understanding what's required for us to serve our respective economies, serve our respective communities, that sort of thing. I think that's really important too. So it just keeps us in conversation with all the right stakeholders. So the project, broadly on a high level perspective for me, ties all those things together quite nicely, and then it also requires us to develop and engage as well. It doesn't end simply by agreeing to doing this thing. It's you're part of like a development team too. So there's all of that, and it's done in such a way where we're all learning this stuff together too. Whether it's the quote unquote student learner, and or the other learners who are involved too. So just philosophically, I think it's a great concept, and we're at a time where we need to really put the value of the humanities forward and remind people that this is I mean, I'm looking at it from that perspective, of course, that this is an important area to continue studying because it's benefits to a civil society is that the core of everything that needs to happen from here on in. Like with AI coming along, we need the human more than ever. But it's not about those just big topic issues. I think we've always needed humans. I think we just have to spell it out more explicitly. And a program like this allows us to think, on that level, even if it has to do with what's going on in the corporate world, or what we're not used to in academia. That is so. Yeah, there's so many angles to it that I find very rewarding for our students and for anyone else involved. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Bassam. Juan Carlos, if I can just show a couple of points that are specific to issues that Bassam raised. So these were the kind of student statements that we're targeting for the work integrated learning placements, that a student after completing one of these curricular will projects would be able to say, here's what I've done to an employer. This was kind of, when the recruiter says, why should we hire you? Here's what you could say about that curricular will project. The bottom one there was specifically speaking to what Bassam was talking about in terms of the distinctive ways of thinking and knowing from the BA and BSc program, providing a distinctive value because I bring a different perspective to the innovation team. And so for the arts and science students in those two paired courses, one of the things we'd like to do is have a reflection exercise that says, in some ways, if you were a literature and culture major or whatever your major was, has shaped the way you think and the way you know. And so how did that lead to you contributing something distinctive? And Bassam, in our wilder moments, we'd even like to say, if you can't figure that out, you should go back to your philosophy professors or whatever your major is and get their help with this because they've had to think about it too. And so that one down here at the bottom was specifically going to be an outcome of that course. Now, we've done some work on this. I'll just highlight 2 or 3 things, and then if people want to see more, just email me and I can send all this out. So we have a blog post summarizing our work with the Australian National Teaching Fellowship Project on the future of the BA. So this was all of the deans of arts across the country working on a joint project about what is the future of the BA. And this post on our website was written by the director of the project and myself to try to specifically address that issue. One of the students created a set of collectible cards called Heroes of the Humanities, which talked about the special power of each of the disciplines. So Textor was suggested by an English literature professor, but we have 7 or 8 of these, and these were really conversation starters with the students. What particular way of thinking have you evolved? One of the faculty member at the University of Waterloo who was working with us was in communication arts, in the Faculty of Arts. And after his first offering of the course, he worked on a second offering that was specifically directed to what do you communication arts students have that every innovation project team should be able to take advantage of? What distinctive ways of thinking and knowing and capabilities have you developed in communication arts? We have one for science students, Juan Carlos, but that's more about here's examples of workplace innovation within science. Because the idea of those online resources is there are case studies and you plug in different cases for different student audiences. But it's a case-based instructional design built to be customized for different disciplines. So that was a student at McMaster who worked for us last summer and curated these case stories and wrote them up in a couple of blog posts. Juan Carlos mentioned that my minor as a BA student was philosophy. So I like to show philosophy professors this particular research paper in the European Journal of Workplace Innovation, which is the primary journal in our field. An article on Ludwig Wittgenstein and his followers and their relevance to workplace innovation, which I thought was really neat. one of those projects that I mentioned to you, the big research projects in Europe, is led by a team from the humanities and social sciences. And when you signed on to join their forum, there's a sheet that comes up saying, what way of thinking and knowing do you represent? And philosophy was one of those. And so I checked that one off. And their reports are particularly interesting about responsible innovation and how companies have to be thinking about that if they're going to engage their workforce over the long term. So we have some examples of this, and again, we want to get our faculty more involved in it. We have another post that I didn't put up there from a professor of English literature and one of her students about how being able to weave a narrative and think in narrative terms is a real advantage as a capability, skill to bring to an innovation team. Felix Nobis, who I showed you earlier from Melbourne, is writing a post about what's the secret sauce that drama and theater students bring to an innovation project. Turns out that learning to direct a play or a movie is ideal preparation for being the leader of an innovation team and taking advantage of everybody's skills the way a good director listens to the actors. So we have some examples, some starting points there for people to work with.
So
Should I?
we are
Yeah.
past the hour. So I will thank you and stop the recording. And I'm happy to stay a bit longer. But I just want to that we have lost a couple of people who had to probably go to their next meeting. So
Right.
I'll just stop the recording now.